We are chatting with Stephen Sanzeri, and he is the author of The Ultimate Prey, the true story behind the Yosemite Sightseer Murders. And this came out in July 28th of 2012. And his resume is amazing. We could probably just spend a whole hour just talking about that. But Stephen, thank you for joining me here.
Thank you, Greg.
We've had some talks about so many different things, and how a lot of this stuff that we're going to talk about here kind of ties in to the Phil Marshall case, which we kind of feel like we've hit this roadblock. And every time that we do, we learn a little bit more. Somebody like yourself, will come and kind of help us out to try to steer us back into the right direction with the Phil Marshall case and what happened with his two young teenage children, and the Calaveras County corruption, I guess you could say. You were saying you had some stats for the Calaveras County, is that right?
Yes, I do, Greg. I was doing a little bit of research last night, and of course after I heard the interview with Dan Hennon and Greg Ford, I started looking into a little bit more, and there's quite a few things that popped up. And I've been a resident on and off of Calaveras County for 25 years, and matter of fact, lived in the same town as Philip Marshall, and with his daughter, or son and daughter, Alex and Michaela. One of the things that caught me last night was I was pulling up the suicide rate per capita in California. And Calaveras County averages, and this is between 2011 and 2014, 3 times the average rate for suicides in the nation, as well as in Calaveras County, the stats were 30.3 suicides per 100,000, even though Calaveras County is about 45,000 people. And I thought that was interesting. And going on the side and parallels of Philip Marshall and the suicide, so-called suicide homicide there, which we don't believe, that shows that these figures are either highly exaggerated or they're way off.
I still feel like there's a lot more to be done with the Philip Marshall case, and there's a lot of strange turns, a lot of strange twists, and I think Dan Hennon and Greg Ford have done some great work on it and have really helped kind of steer me back into it, because there's so many different cases out there. Nobody can keep track of all of these different cases, and so I do want to thank you for that. Do you know when was the first time you ever heard of the Philip Marshall case?
It was probably about 2 weeks after it occurred, and I got a call from a friend of mine, and she had told me what had happened, and she knew my background and such, and doing the Yosemite Sightseer Murder case, and so I started looking into it a little bit. I didn't take any trips up there. I was actually running and managing Aliotos in San Francisco, a fine restaurant on the Fisherman's Wharf. But I went up there about 2 years later and kind of peeked around, and of course just for my own gratification, as far as seeing what everybody was saying about the house and distances between the neighbors and such, and being in law enforcement, being around firearms and such. I don't see any way possible that somebody didn't hear any of the shots, and that kind of woke me up a little bit. And then I, of course, listened to Wayne Madsen and his investigation up there, and his background is extensive and such. And then I did buy the book, The Big Bamboozle, and 911 False Flag, and I went through pretty much most of it, and I didn't have to go through all of it. His connection with Barry Seal and the CIA and such, and we'll talk more about that, of course, in Calaveras County, that this is no doubt 100% of the Shadow Ops, Black Ops hit.
Have you read his fictional book, Lakefront Airport?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I'm gonna send that over to you. I think it's, of course, it's a quote unquote fiction, but
sure,
it's really loosely based on Phil Marshall, kind of being the taxi driver for Barry Seal. Goes into a guy named Tom Cathy, I believe. Oliver North, is that right? Tom Cathy is.
Oliver North, sure.
Yeah. And so it's a very interesting book. I did not realize some of the other things that Phil Marshall was involved with, but once I found out he was involved with Barry Seal, it was like, okay. And then Barry Seal was tied to David Ferrie, and now we're in John F. Kennedy. It's just like, all of this stuff definitely ties in. And I know you've done this book that you have here about the true story behind the Yosemite Sightseer Murders. This happened in the 90s, is that right, when this happened?
The three women, it was Carole Sund, her daughter Juli Sund, and her friend Silvina Pelosso from Argentina took a road trip up to Yosemite National Park. Silvina had never seen the snow, and it was a road trip. Juli was visiting UOP in Stockton, University of Pacific, to go to school there, and they continued on to Yosemite. And between February 14th and 15th, 1999, they disappeared. And I had a background in relationship with Mariposa County from my earlier days in 1995, when I was actually arrested and indicted on 3 or 4 felonies and a few misdemeanors when I was on a bounty. And went to court, went all the way to preliminary trial, and then a circuit judge came in and looked at the case and dropped it. I ended up taking like a 415 little low-octane misdemeanor, and total setup. The guy that accused myself and my partner was a nephew of a sergeant in Mariposa County, and every time I went after this bounty, and the fellow's name was Cliff Watkins, and he was a big player. He was actually a mule for transporting the drugs that the Mariposa County Sheriff's Department were picking up at the airport and taking to Yosemite Park. And this is right after the Iran-Contra scandal. And I started looking into it more, and things weren't working out. Usually you go on a bounty. We'd caught most of the guys, but we couldn't seem to catch this guy, but he'd be seen in town 10 minutes earlier. And I soon found out the Mariposa County Sheriff's Department would notify Cliff Watkins, who was a very, very violent felon. And that's the reason we couldn't get a hold of him, couldn't grab him on the bounty. So after I was arrested and such, I went through court and all that kind of stuff in the pursuit. And I still was pursuing him even after I was indicted, and it was for a company called Dennis Wyckoff Bail Bonds. Dennis had gotten in some trouble, and the surety company, which was AmWest Surety Company, I was kind of their fixer. I'd go out when there was extra liability on a bail bond where they couldn't find a guy, and they'd hire me to go get the guy, and so they could release the liability for the bondsman. And I had hired a private investigator named Ron Adams, and Ron Adams was the former Angels Camp, which is in Calvert County. It's the only incorporated town in Calvert County. He was the chief of police at one time, and I'd gotten a call from state parole telling me this Cliff Watkins was in custody in Shasta County, California. I called up there, and they gave me some names also as AKAs, also known as, and one of the names he used was the same name as the guy who accused us of hurting them on a bounty, which we didn't do. His name was Jimmy Jones, the nephew of the sergeant. So we flew on up there, and I called my attorney and such, and we got a copy of the booking sheet. And Jimmy Jones' name was on Cliff Watkins' booking sheet. So we met with Cliff Watkins, and definitely the Charles Manson kind of guy, the kind of guy wants your daughter to date, that's for sure. And he basically told me his life was over, and he started going in and chirping like a bird. He was telling us about Mariposa County and where they were hiding the drugs when they came in through the airport, and they would be taken to Yosemite Park, but also stored in a cove that Joaquin Murrieta used, 130 years earlier. And this is right after they found Mariposa County Sheriff's Deputy Ron Van Meter. They located his body. It was in Lake McClure. Of course, he was deceased, and it was 10 years after he was reported missing by his wife. He was a boat patrol deputy on Lake McClure, and he was infiltrating, and he wasn't digging what was going on. That the other deputies, slinging all the dope and everything. And he went to our Attorney General in California, and along with another deputy named Lucky Jordan. And Ron Van Meter came home, and 2 days later, he's not found anywhere. And then 10 years later, they found him. Lucky Jordan went to the FBI afterwards and got witness protection, actually. So he survived, but Mariposa was believed to kill their own deputy. And there's a film on YouTube that 2020 News went in there for ABC, and they infiltrated that and got some interviews and such. That was pretty interesting. So after the Cliff Watkins ordeal, things have, I didn't think about much. Things calmed down, and then here comes the Yosemite murder case. And I bailed a guy out named Paul Candler, Jr., who resided in Calaveras County. And so Paul Candler, Jr. jumps bond on me right about the time the girls go missing. And I thought it was strange and such, and it took me several months to find him. So we ended up locating him in Alabama on June 7th, 1999, and on June 9th, I should say 10th, the day's off on that with the paper. On June 9th, they found a missing person, Dr. Kathleen Wong, a doctor out of Santa Clara County who was skiing up at Mount Reba, Bear Valley, which in Alpine County is about 30 miles from Calaveras County, where Paul Candler actually lived, right down the road in Calaveras County. And it's Highway 4, straight up the road. And it was just ironic, a day and a half later, they find the doctor's body. She went missing February of 99, 4 days after, February 19th, 4 days after the girls went missing. And a day and a half after I apprehend Paul Candler in Fultondale, Alabama, they find Dr. Wong's body in Bear Valley. So it's kind of ironic. It's not a coincidence by any means. We believe Paul Candler was a hitman, and it was a hired hit.
For what purpose? I mean, what's the
for insurance money.
Insurance. Okay.
Yeah, they looked at the husband. They looked at everybody, but the same fellow that I arrested or apprehended for the Yosemite murders was the same fellow that gave the FBI Dr. Wong's deceased body up in Bear Valley.
Interesting.
Yeah, 4 days apart on the missing persons. 4 days apart. Also, they're both in the mother lode. They're several hours away, but Paul Candler did live in the area of Arnold, California, which is 4 miles above Murphy's, California, where Philip Marshall and his kids were murdered.
That's weird. That's an amazing, interesting area there. The Yosemite Sightseer Murders, what do you, can you give us maybe a little background on what exactly happened? I'm still trying to get caught up on that case and how this Cary Stayner gets found guilty so quickly.
Yeah, when they went missing, what happened was Carole Sund was supposed to call her husband they were going to meet him at San Francisco, at SFO, San Francisco International Airport, and she didn't show up, and that was supposed to be on the 16th of February, 1999, and so they started doing searching, and they got a manhunt, but a search and rescue out there for the gals, and they couldn't find them. And about 6 weeks later, they found a burned out car with the remains of Mrs. Sund, Carole Sund, and Silvina Pelosso in it. And they were deceased. The car had been torched up the area of Long Barn in Tuolumne County, and that neighbors Calaveras County. But where was Julie, the daughter of Carole Sund, Juli Sund? So FBI and everybody's involved with it, task force, and Sonora was set up. Rewards were set up, $250,000 by the Carringtons, who were a very prominent family, and they were up out of Eureka, California. And about 4 weeks after that, they found Julie's body right on a little downslope that's off of a lookout in a parking lot on Lake Don Pedro. in Tuolumne County, and they found her partially decapitated and deceased. And so they're looking for these guys, and the FBI and law enforcement ended up gathered about 8 or 9 suspects in the case, and these are former cranksters and drug dealers and everything out of that area, and Mariposa's heavily into the crank, the methamphetamine. And so they found these guys, and they had parole tails on them and violations and everything else. And they just didn't look at Paul Candler, my guy. And I'd even written an 18-page report to the FBI task force in Sonora. And I never heard from them. They totally just credited me on this and everything else. So I went to Mr. Carrington's attorney up in Eureka, and Mr. Carrington got a hold of me, and I ended up taking the case. I never charged him anything. I didn't charge him any money for that. But I basically told him, if anybody can handle this, I can. I'd already had a dance with the devil, I call it, with Mariposa County, who had set me up earlier. And there was a lot of friction between myself and Mariposa and the Carringtons. I was told to be taken off the case by Mariposa, this and that. And Mr. Carrington, of course, kept me on that case. So in June, I got a call from a gal that I had working for me over in Tuolumne County, and she said, I know where Paul Candler's at. And this gal was the stepdaughter of Paul Candler, and they had an estranged relationship. So I got a phone number, and I called back to Alabama, and it was Summerton, Alabama, and it was June 5th. So my partner and I, after I confirmed they were possibly there, we took a red eye back to Birmingham, and that next day we spotted Paul Candler. So we saw him, and we ended up getting in a pursuit. We lost him. We'd already contacted Jefferson County and local jurisdictions that we were there. And the day before I left, June 5th, so it'll be June 4th, I had the Tuolumne County detectives come over to my house, actually, in Murphy's, and I explained to them what I was going to do, and they promised to put Paul Candler into the NCIC, National Criminal Information Center. And when I got back there, I spotted Candler. I called the deputy DA, and they'd only put it in the 7 western states, so I couldn't get any cooperation from Alabama law enforcement, so we were on our own. So the next evening, we headed out about 11 o'clock. At midnight, we went to the house. We'd seen him. We pretty much forcibly entered the premise thinking he was there. And the 911 call came in about the time we were there. Let me digress. Barbara Dobbins, the girlfriend, was on the phone as we were entering the house, and she was on a phone call. We checked the caller ID, those little ones that used to have the name and such and the location number, and it was coming from Birmingham, Alabama, days in, and the name said Paul Gear, and I knew that was Candler. So what Candler made, the first mistake he made, which benefited our manhunt, was he called 911, and Jefferson County deputies rolled up. It's 12:15. It's late. 4 or 5 came to the scene, and I had wanted posters I'd made, and I usually pass these out when I have a hard time finding the guy and such. And the FBI called me, like I said, about getting rid of my wanted posters. I think I explained earlier to you the day I was there. The FBI knew I was there, and these deputies had my wanted poster in their back pockets and said, "Your guy is now the #1 manhunt, #1 suspect in Alabama." So we had everybody looking for him. And so the deputies left, and we kind of followed them in toward Alabama to Birmingham and then up toward Fulton, Alabama. And it was a full manhunt. It was a full grid search, 4 or 5 agencies involved. Grids were set up on the highway. And we found a motel where he was at, and he just split. Even the beer he had in the hotel room was still cold. So we just missed them. And so they were calling for, there was some like swamp water and such. They were actually going to bring some, just like U.S. Marshals, they were going to bring these guys out in those little swamp boats with, big spotlights and 30-06s and all that. That's how they handle it back there. And that would become when the sun breaks in the morning. And so we looked and we hit a couple more motels. It was like a motel row. It was like 6 of them lined up. And I think it was a Super 8. And we went there, and the gal positively identified him she even said he smelled like the swamps. And the registration on the hotel register was Dave Gear. So it was Paul Candler. So we surrounded the motel, and it was a corner room, and they were bringing everybody in. By now, I think it was like 4:30 in the morning, and you could hear the patrol cars, the gravel kind of crunching up above us, and the guys were out with high-powered rifles, the whole 9 yards. And my partner and I were at the front door. I volunteered to go ahead and be the entry guy, because you take responsibility when you're a bail bondsman for your liability and your bounties. So just as the sun broke, the curtains moved, and I had my 9mm out and such, and he came out like a wildcat right at me, and we went to the ground, and he was trying to get my gun, and I'm trying to fight him, and all of a sudden, these guys are big quarterback guys, they don't mess around, and a big pile in there, and we secured Paul Candler, and they took him in, and we ended up taking him to Fultondale City Jail, and the FBI was on their way and everything, and now I've considered him a main suspect. They wouldn't have given us that much attention if he wasn't good for the Yosemite case.
Hmm. And whatever happened? What happened to him?
What happened was he fought extradition. So they had to get a governor's warrant out of California to bring him back, and that's kind of something that tells you might be a little bit guilty also. So they brought him back to California a month later, and I get a call, maybe a week or so after that, from a neighbor in Alabama saying, "This guy's back." And I was thinking, "What? You sure it's the same guy?" And it was. Paul Candler was back, and which is really strange because Merced County had warrants on him. He threatened and attempted to kill his own mother. So what's this guy running around loose for? There was no restraint on him or anything. So the pressure was put on and everything else, and he ended up going away about 6 months later. He just, I don't know, he pulled a robbery or something, but 6 months later they convicted him of sexual abuse of a 12-year-old girl, and he went away 12 years into Hatchby State Prison.
That's in where's that? Hatchby.
Hatchby. It's right out down by Bakersfield.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's by off of 58 in the Mojave, that area. So it's down the south, down there. What's interesting is Paul Candler was paroled in 2017, and he was paroled to Wilseyville in Calaveras County, and that's the same location. Charles Ng, Leonard Lake, and also the Speed Freak killers were very close to that too. So this is a very, very dangerous area up there. Most people really, if they really look into it, and maybe they don't want to, but this goes on to everything back into Calaveras County. So I wrote the book in 2012, published it, everything, and during my travels, it's probably about a year after I'd caught Candler, I started looking into other suspects, and that opened up a lot of doors. And with Michael Larwick and his half brother Eugene Dykes, with the shooting of Officer Silva out of Modesto PD, and during these manhunts for these guys, when these Yosemite murders happened, they all had ties to Calaveras County. Michael Larwick had extensive rape charges and things like that. And matter of fact, when he was being pulled over as a suspect in the Yosemite case, he opened fire on Steve Silva, a Modesto motorcycle officer. Steve was hit a couple times. He survived, but there was 30 rounds of ammunition exchanged between the two of them. And Mick Larwick, they call him, he commandeered a house with some people in it. So it was like a 14-hour standoff, and they got him out, and his half brother did the same thing. This is why Cary Stayner didn't do it alone, because when you go to pull somebody over and they start shooting at you in the middle of a case like this with an extensive criminal history and meth and rape and all this kind of stuff, and everybody else they rounded up gave them some problems also, and that's where they came out with 9 suspects, and they ended up only convicting 1.
Why just one? Just not enough to convict the other 8?
No, when you look at it, George Cleese from CABDA posted some stuff, and it's involved. The drug, as you know, the drug trades go all the way up. You know, we're talking with as far as with the Contras and drugs for guns and such. There were some power brokers involved that were protecting these guys. I believe Paul Candler was a hitman for this group. Larwick and his brother were big dope dealers, and there was going to be a lot of people brought down, big careers and such, if any of these guys were convicted in the case, or they wanted if they were going to be convicted, they might talk. And so Cary Stayner, he was the fall guy. He killed the 3 women. If he did, it was with other people. He didn't do it alone, and there's no way. Every time he went to one of the hotel rooms or was hanging out by the pool or the spa at Cedar Lodge, and that's in El Portal, right between Mariposa and Yosemite Park, he was always with somebody. When I interviewed the mayor of Modesto, Carmen Sabatino, he was staying there with a gal, and he positively identified Cary Stayner and Paul Candler, my guy, that came to the door. And so Cary Stayner had access to the rooms, didn't fit the MO of a serial killer or anybody like that. But when they found Joie Armstrong, and that was about 6 months after the Yosemite murders, and they found her decapitated. And she lived in a little area called Forestra, and that's right there by El Portal. And she was a naturalist. She'd take kids out for hikes and such in Yosemite. And it's believed to be Cary Stayner had murdered Joie Armstrong by himself. And everything leads to that. And the reason for that is, believe it or not, when Rollins interviewed him after he was captured up at the Laguna de Sal nudist colony in Sacramento, he wanted a TV movie just like his brother Stephen Stayner, who was the kid years ago. The book I Know My Name's Stephen, written by Mike Eccles, and there was a movie about it and such, right? And so he wanted the publicity, and that's what he said he did that, but he did not. He didn't put hands on as far as Julie and Silvina and Carole Sund. Those were several people involved in that, and one of the things is that the MO, the modus operandi, we call it. The MOs were different. You got a burned car, and then you got a gal that was, found over by Lake Don Pedro. And we're talking about this child trafficking and stuff. I look back, and I think, because Julie was held for about 6 weeks. They had gang raped her, drugged her up, and everything. Really tortured her, And then they got rid of her up there. But they were looking for blonde gals and such. And she looked young. She's 15, but she looked younger. And I think, when we talk about all the stuff that's going on now, and even back then, they were targeted. It was an inside job at the hotel, Cedar Lodge, because they were put up in an area in February, which was this whole separate building where nobody else was at. And so this thing goes between the drug trades and the trafficking back then, and the people involved. Mariposa County was involved in drug trafficking. We know that. And so this is a group of bad guys that were going out and doing the dirty work.
And they were protected by some very powerful
right.
people, it sounds like.
Yes, they were. Yeah, they sure were. Mm-hmm.
All in the same area.
Yes, absolutely. And you look at the Shermantine and Herzog and Charles Ng. Charles Ng thing might be a little bit early, but with the speed freak killers, I think that's going on. They Calvert County, they found 7 bodies in Maloney's Reservoir, Lake Maloney's, as some people call it. They found 7 bodies that were tied to Russian bank laundering and such. They brought, and all those people were actually brought up from Los Angeles and dumped there. Why Calvert County?
Right.
It seems to be falling into an awful lot of what's going on, and those counties up there. I don't know how Calvert now is exactly with the new sheriff and such, but even we talked about the marijuana grows up there. We spoke earlier about the 800 commercial marijuana grows in 2015 that were approved, and there's no county or jurisdiction in the United States that has even come close to allowing that many, or at least those years then. And like Pennsylvania, I think they allowed 25 marijuana grows for the whole state. And Calvert County a county of 40,000 people, they have 800 permits. This thing, that was set up as a litmus test, a grassroots thing to see. And there was a lot of organized crime involved with the marijuana grows in Calaveras County. It brought people from Florida. I worked for G Pharma as a security consultant when they had plants that were taken, and I saw how those guys operated even. So there was a bigger agenda, much larger agenda related to the meth and even the cocaine.
Yeah, I'm curious what it's like up there now. I mean, I can only guess that it's not gotten better. It's probably gotten worse. Maybe the operation is a lot more sophisticated now. I'm wondering now that with the weed being legal, I wonder how that affects all of this stuff too. And it's probably going to make it easier for them to get involved with some of these other crimes here. But I'm just so fascinated how you connect all of these dots, and you do it so articulate and so well, and you're like right in the middle of all of this stuff. And of course, we got to ask the question. I'm sure you get this all the time, but do you feel like you're in any danger? Obviously at some point you did, but and your story, just reading through some of the notes that you sent me, and I will probably play those or probably read those out in post-production or something, just because it's so fascinating, and I think it's going to really help a lot of people understand the stuff that we're talking about. But do you have any fears about going into the dancing with the devil, I guess would be the best way to say it?
No, I did. I posted 2 years ago when funny things were going on, and I'd come back up from San Francisco, and I was actually running some yacht charters for a very good friend, Captain Larry Murray, and so we're chartering out of San Francisco, and there was some funny things going on around South Beach Pier 40, and I didn't pay much attention to it, but I'd come back, and I had a couple more yachts that I was working on. I did engine work as well as even crewing and such. And I'd come back, and these things would be infiltrated. And I, like, am I seeing things? But I always kind of give the a parallel of you come back from going to the store or something like that. Not whether you have a sense or not, but you can tell if something in your home has been moved. And these yachts, I mean, they're not that big, and you live on them and such. And so I'd come back after a trip or so for a couple of days, and they were say broken into, but they usually have from the V berth they'll have a hatch, or up down at the aft they'll have a hatch, and they need these, and they have to be able to be opened from the inside. They're not locked, and you can jimmy them pretty well. And then I started talking to some of the other boat owners there in San Francisco, and they were having problems like their batteries would be drained and things like this. And so it's kind of a spooky place out there because, I'm out by myself about 200 yards on a pier, and I'm the only guy out there. Even though there's 800 boats and yachts and sailboats and such, but, go back at night. It's a yacht club and everything, but at nighttime it's kind of spooky. And that's when I first started kind of thinking, I call it eyes on me. And so I went back up to Calaveras County. My daughter was up that way and such, and I was in between places. I stayed at a hotel here, a friend's house, kind of figuring where I want to go next. And I just see things you just notice out of the ordinary. And being former law enforcement and a narcotics cop and a bail agent and a bounty hunter and a PI, and, I picked up a lot of things over the years, and that just started right. And I started just when I came back to my hotel room, which was about a year and a half ago, and I'm actually in this business now, the spy camera detection business, because of this. I found 2 cameras in my hotel room. So I knew some stuff was going on. I can't get into depth on it. It's posted on CabDef and another site I'll give you. Actually, I wrote it down with a National Coalition for Men. I posted something, but they picked up my story on it. I called Eyes on Me. And at that time, I started thinking, what's going on? So I started looking into Sherry Seymour's book, The Last Circle. And that was written about Calaveras County and the mysterious death of Danny Casarello, who was one of the guys who was breaking the Iran-Contra stuff just about the same time Gary Webb was. And of course, both those guys met their demise. Interestingly, it was suicide, and apparently the other one was, they say maybe was killed, I don't know. But I started tracking Mariposa, and I said, how far do I want to reach this thing? And Sherry had written about Inslaw and Promise Software and such, and I looked into it more. And Promise Software, and this was a software that everybody wanted. The Department of Justice wanted it. It was a tracking system for all the judicial cases, crimes, all that kind of stuff in the United States. And they were offered big money. The Hamiltons were the ones who invented it. Well, the attorney on that was Hillary Clinton when she was with Rose's Law Group. Okay, and she was with Rose's Law Group back when Bill just became governor and such, and we got Mena, Arkansas, and we have the airport there and everything else, and Barry Seal and Philip Marshall. So I started looking at that, and Sherry writes extensively about it in her book, The Last Circle. It's a very, very good read. And it talks about Mariposa and such, as well as when Dennis McDougal, the LA Times reporter who wrote the first book on Yosemite murders, also wrote The Last Mogul, which ties in Yosemite and possible drug trade through the Iran-Contra dealings in his book also. So when I started looking at, there's possibly a Clinton relationship into Mariposa, and I have Cliff Watkins who's telling me what's going on with the drug trade with the sheriff's departments and such. I stepped on some toes, and I didn't know when I wrote the book, and I really didn't know until about 2 years ago. And that's when things started happening. Right now, I'm in great shape. People know where I'm at. I'm not hiding or anything like that, and I'm not, I'm really not scared anymore. And some people will give it, they would have got you if they would have got you. Well, I take a little credit for surviving, so many bounties and being on the street as a cop and everything. But I don't think I'm a threat to them any longer. I've actually called them out publicly to try to stop this. I've had weird phone calls to. I've had outside of an apartment one night, 2 in the morning. There's 3 guys out there that were kind of hanging out, looking at the apartment. And like I said, it gets more into depth, but. I'm not putting myself in the same level as Philip Marshall, but he was extinguished, for lack of a better word, because he's probably the last man that could do anything about 911. And I feel maybe with the Yosemite case, and I have no goal to open that case up whatsoever. If I could get an interview with Cary Stayner in San Quentin, I'd take it. But I think they realize that now. But Mariposa, as well as possibly Calvert County, and we talked about some cells there with possible CIA connections, which I do know about. Is that area up there is a hotbed for a lot of screwy things. And when I found out about Inslaw and Promise Software, and it went to Hillary Clinton with the Rose Law Firm, those drugs, probably a large percentage of the cocaine industry was being moved through Mariposa County.
Right in the middle of all of this.
Right.
From your view, this all ties in. There is a tie here between all of this and Philip Marshall. You definitely think he was taken out. He did not commit.
Absolutely. It just on the surface. We can go with there was no suicide note. We can go with nobody kills the dog, little Shih Tzu. We can go through all that. The bottom line is he wrote a book. He wrote 3 books total. He had a 4th book coming out. Like Wayne Madsen said, and I think Greg Ford touched on this, that it was going to be the one that really was going to blow the top off things. Mm-hmm. And they can't have that. They can't allow that to get out. And and if people think, the government never killed kids. Take another look. They'll take anybody out. They took the dog out so it wouldn't continuously probably bark for 4 hours or 5. So there's no rules when it comes to a government whatever black ops shadow company is hired to go ahead and do these things. And it was a professional hit. And dealing with the Candler up there, which I don't think. In fact, he was in Tehachapi at the time. It definitely was. It was a shadow company kind of gig that came in. Very, high-end professional, extermination team that did that. No mistakes, nothing else. And we talked about Calvert County. I I know Kevin Raggio. You know, I bartended a short time in Angels Camp at Clausen's Corner, and Kevin came in, and and this is after, all this happened, and I never brought it up or anything. Where was I going to get, But it was interesting. I thought he was a pretty good guy, but if the CIA or somebody comes in and says this is how it's going to be, the sheriff's department is going to do what they tell them to do. And looking at Cal versus Pass, I had problems with them with some other cases and such. They have no problems sweeping stuff under the rug. And, Kevin's not going to come out and call it anything different than what they told him to call it.
Interesting. Yeah, he was a curious one. My friend Chris had spoken with him, and one of the things that Chris told me is that Kevin Raggio said that the incident, and I'm trying to pull up the actual quote here, but he said that the incident was suspicious. The way he said, let me see if I can find that quote, because it was very, hopefully I have it here. They were, maybe, sorry, I said it. They were talking about a silencer. Chris asked, do you find that suspicious? So Chris then wondered how one of the two teenagers would not wake up to the sound of a gunshot that was a few feet from their ears, because we were told that both of the kids were sleeping when they were shot, and obviously, well, unless they were drugged or something like that, how does one of them, and they're both sleeping on the same couch, so how does one of them get shot and the other doesn't wake up? And Chris asked him, do you find that suspicious? He said, no, I don't find that suspicious. He says, it's a mystery, but it's not suspicious. It's like, well, if it's a mystery, if it's mysterious, how is that not? It just sounds like he's just kind of, like you said, he's basically, he's got his talking points, he's told what he should go with, and that's really it. He's not really open to the fact, well, wait a minute, how does that happen? And there's these little things that we find out that just don't really sit well, and it doesn't really, lead us to think that Philip Marshall is guilty. But he said, well, Chris said, you don't find it suspicious that a gunshot wouldn't wake up a child? And Kevin Raggio said, well, I don't, looking at the same scene. I mean, yeah, it's mysterious in my mind, but I don't find it suspicious. As far as it makes me wonder, like I said, it makes me wonder if one of them heard anything, but do I find it suspicious? I don't find it suspicious. I don't suspect that from what I can see. It is what we determined it was. It was a murder-suicide. And he says, not to my knowledge, my job is not to determine the cause of death. I don't deal with the criminal aspect of the whole thing. But yet he's pretty much, dealing with the aspect of the whole thing. It appears to be what it is. When you shoot yourself, you're standing up. There's a considerable amount of blood splatter that goes in every direction. The blood splatter, unless somebody was floating, they would have, in my mind, had to have tracked in that blood splatter. So he's pretty much saying, well, there's no way that it couldn't have been. It had to have been Philip Marshall. Now, at that point, we didn't know anything about how Philip Marshall had died. We didn't know that the cops thought that Philip Marshall was standing up and then shot himself next to the front door, and somehow the gun falls underneath him too, which is kind of weird. So there's a lot of things like that. I won't read the whole thing, but then Chris kind of asked him about if he was standing up, and Kevin Raggio said yeah. Kevin Raggio also didn't believe that a foreign country like Saudi Arabia staged these deaths to appear as a double murder-suicide. He says, I've heard all these conspiracy theories and all this other stuff, and in my mind, if you're a foreign country, you're coming after Phil Marshall, you'd send somebody in.
Oh,
Italian,
God.
so I'd send for the boys in Sicily, and they'd come in, and you know what I mean. It'd be like the Sopranos. The boy from Italy would come, and he doesn't give a damn if it looks like a murder or a suicide. They're gonna put bullets in your head, and they're gonna leave, and that's gonna be it. But in this case, why would you go out of your way to stage it as a murder-suicide? What do you think about that?
Is that verbatim from Kevin?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Wow. First off, is it the postmaster that determines the cause of death? I don't know. Maybe I'm on another planet. I mean, come on, Kevin. I mean, it's when you start rambling on like that, it's a whole bunch of, excuse my language, a bunch of horse duty. There's too much against it not being a homicide, three homicides and a dog, and the witnesses to the white vehicles, and you know what, the Saudi Arabia thing, okay, we know with the 911 and the bushes, maybe we're reaching on that a little bit, but the bottom line is it wasn't guys from Saudi Arabia, it could have been guys from Sacramento, or there's you'd be surprised how many people out there, there's as far as hired hits and hitmen and such, but it was something like this. And, something Greg brought up and is the postman. And that's a rural area, so the rural carriers, they usually drop stuff. They have those boxes that are conglomerated, maybe there's 12. They don't really knock on doors and do unless you got a package. But, that's smart infiltration is, as a bailman. I mean, when you see, any car parks in front of, you've been up there, if you park a car in front of somebody's house, you'll notice it right away that car doesn't belong there,
Right.
A mailman, he can get in and around all he wants. If you want to put a seed into a cell as a postal delivery guy, one call from wherever, they can get that guy into San Andreas. I could see that happening. I do know the area very well. I was a partner in the Clearwoods Country Club, so I've golfed at Forest Meadows, and that back road that goes out there, goes along, I forget which holes they are, but that back road comes on the other side of the golf course. They could go in and out of that. And I believe, the shootings were earlier in the morning. And it was interesting too is the New Orleans Saints were playing that day. Philip Marshall would not have done that on, the weekend of a game.
Yeah, that was Super Bowl Sunday, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and who was playing?
Yeah,
New Orleans.
They were playing. Yeah, I
forget
who they were playing.
And so, I mean, that there, what that kind of tells me, F you to Philip Marshall. They could have picked a Thursday. They could have picked Monday after the game. They picked it, and it was on a Sunday. They're trying to. The time of death is kind of varies between 1.5 and 3 days or whatever it is. I don't know. And so I'm not specific on that, but he sure wouldn't have killed himself or the kids before the game. I mean, maybe that's being a little light on that. I apologize, but there's no way. He was the biggest fan. Knew Sean Payton. Matter of fact, I grew up with Sean Payton for a short time in the Bay Area. He was an next door neighbor, if you can believe that, when we were kids. But there's no way that he would do that. So to me, that was that's a big smoke signal. That sticks out to me. Like, really, what? It's almost insult to injury. We're gonna take care of this before the game. I mean, really. I mean, so that part of it there kind of rubbed me a little bit wrong. So I don't think it was just happenstance or coincidence they picked that time. I think it was on purpose.
That is a great point that I think it's one of the great points that I think gets overlooked too.
Right.
I think Philip Marshall didn't own a gun until maybe a week or so before. I remember reading something about he had purchased, I don't know if it was a gun or bullets from a Big Five, and they have him on camera doing that. We had went up to the grocery store, and we had asked some of the people there, did they notice anything weird or anything strange about Marshall? And they were like, no, he was, everything seemed fine. He didn't seem crazy. He didn't look like, they didn't notice anything strange about him. So, but yet all of a sudden he's just supposed to have snapped and to have killed himself and kills his kids. Why kill the kids too? It doesn't make any sense. I don't know if you know this or not, but the gun was found inverted. So the gun was pressed up to the right side of his head, and it was found inverted. And I was like, well, what does that mean? It's like, so he is actually upside down, or the gun, the head of the gun, whatever you call it, the barrel, right? So,
barrel.
And I guess, and I forget which hand it was, but when you kind of look at it, it doesn't really make sense for him to have shot himself in that way with the gun. First of all, I've never really heard of anybody, if you're going to point the gun to your head, you're not going to have the gun upside down. I've never heard of that. So I thought that was kind of strange too. How does that happen? And then I guess it was supposed to be with let's see, if it was on the right side of his head. Yeah, it's just, it's these little tiny pieces that we just kind of got, and I think they were just hoping that everybody would just kind of stop talking about it and just, say that this guy was just crazy. He had some mental problems. He believed in 9/11 conspiracies, but he was a pilot. And it's these pilots, I guess, it's a very, I don't want to call it a cult, but it's kind of rare. Everybody knows each other in that business, and that's how we were able to get some other little facts out too, of just where Philip Marshall was apparently running around, not being very quiet about his CIA ties too, and being vocal about that. Do you think that could have caused him some issues?
No, he was, as soon as he typed the first page on the false flag and Big Bamboozle, he was probably doomed. That's one of the reasons that, like with myself, I looked into large publishers, vanity publishers. I published my book myself, but they don't want to touch those kind of stories. If you're all pro, George Bush and we did our best and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't cause any friction against, the 911, and you're not a conspiracy nut. They'll publish your book, but as soon as you come out against what the general populace believes or what everybody's telling you, they won't touch the book. I mean, I know that from just being a writer. And I got questions about with the so-called gunplay in the house and things like that. And one thing is that I like to see the gunshot residue off of his hand, off his fingers. If he fired this gun, we always wipe your hands, your fingers, wherever. And I like to see the pictures of the tattooing from the weapon. How close was the weapon to him? Apparently, Greg said that the kids were asleep. They probably shot the dog first downstairs. They came up, they shot the kids, and I guess whatever commotion, Philip came out of the bedroom. And if he's toward the door, it tells me he was probably trying to get out of there. He saw it. He went, oh God, this is going on, And so as soon as he went to the kids, probably a person, the shooter or shooters, he saw, your first thing is going to be flight, and he's going to run. So if they got him, but have you seen the crime scene pictures, the photos?
No, we never got any photos.
Yeah.
No. I don't know.
We should.
That's possible.
Yeah. I'd like to see the crime scene sketch.
Yeah.
Even that, and where his body is at compared to this and that, and yeah, apparently, the records are there. They purchased the gun not too long before that, and he had a feeling. Just like I said, what was going on with me after, several years after the book, is that, you say you just, we're old enough. We have that sixth sense. We know when something's not right. So we made so many cases as police officers just on our gut instincts. And that's a big part of it. And Philip, he knew what it was. He knew as soon as this next book was coming out. Wayne Matson had spoke to some of Phil's relatives, and one of them was government law enforcement. And he was kind of worried about him too. And I guess the next book was really going to do a number on the whole theory on 911, and that's what happened there. But he probably knew the risk. There's no way that was acceptable in any way. But the risk like that, I don't think he knew it was going to go that far. But if he went out and got after a book's published, how many years earlier, and all of a sudden he goes and gets a gun, something was up.
Well, this says, according to their documents, all that we have is I think it's a 6-page press release where they talk about everything that they found there, and they say that in October of 2011, Marshall purchased a Glock 9mm handgun from a gun store in Turlock. The gun was registered to him, and on January 27, 2013, which is about maybe a week or so before, maybe 2 weeks before this happened, Marshall was videotaped purchasing ammunition from Big 5 Sporting Goods in Sonora. So, I guess we can assume he might have had the gun for a year or two.
Sure he did, okay.
Probably didn't have bullets, though.
Okay, there you go. That's my mistake. Yeah, then the bullets are what he purchased closer to the incident. The gun was purchased earlier. Okay, so it was the bullets. Okay.
Now here's the crazy thing. The same clothes that he was wearing on January 27th are the same clothes that he was found in when his body was found on February 2nd. So I just thought that was kind of weird. Maybe it's a week. Maybe he's only got 1 week's worth of clothes, and but it just seemed kind of interesting too. And he paid cash for those bullets too. So I don't know. That's another thing that kind of stands out. He's paying cash for this. That's maybe not too unusual, but. Sonora, how far is Sonora from Murphy's? It's not that close, is it?
Oh yeah, it's only about 35-minute drive.
35-minute drive, okay.
Yeah, it's slow because of the roads, but as a crow flies, it's only about 10 miles. If you could fly a plane over there, it's not that far. You just go across the bridge and you're in there. It's not that far, no. And there's really no gun shops or anything really left in Calvert County, I don't think then. If let's just say he's wearing the same clothes, he may have been. Listen, I know the two kids that looked through the window and saw Philip or it's the kids. I think they saw Philip. I know that I'm very close to the two children. They went to school with my daughter also at Bret Harte with Alex and Michaela, and so they're the ones I never spoke to them about, but they're the ones who apparently looked through the window. When people started calling and say, "Hey, where's the kids?" and that, they usually won't do it in a day or so. Maybe Philip was actually murdered the day of he bought the bullets, because that means they had when you put a hit on something like this, these guys have been watching him for months. They're watching every habit, every time he flushes a toilet, whatever happens, they want this down to a T because we're creatures of habit. And he took a walk with that gal every day or whatever. I didn't know about him having the same apparel on, so it tells me is that when he went to get bullets, they knew that there was going to be a defensive situation. And, hey, what's better, if you can drop a shadow ops guy in your house, great. They probably put him up for murder, and the guy was probably, the second coming. They'd make that up. But the point is, if he was in the same attire, the man had money, having this, I haven't seen pictures. They're saying that, who said that he had the same clothing on a week later or whatever?
That's in the Calaveras County. That's in their 6-page press release, which
really?
I will send that over to you. I do have a copy.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I think you'll probably be able to pick out some more good stuff here. Since you're an experienced person, me, I'm just looking at this like I don't really know. That's why I keep going over and over it. Like, what am I missing here? What are they? And really what I'm looking for is just anything that will help show that Philip Marshall is guilty. And the more that I look at it, it's like this just does not make sense. It should not be this complicated. There shouldn't be so many questions if it's just a simple guy for whatever reason decides to kill his kids and then kill him.
Sure.
Himself.
He can't.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, after everything that he's done, how involved he was with his kids' lives, it doesn't make sense. There's no motive for it.
No, it doesn't. A couple other bullet points. I spoke to my daughter right after it happened, and he killed his kids. And okay, I didn't, it's my daughter. She was like 13 then. whatever. You know, everybody was pretty upset about it, but you know, he's been vilified in the area for this. The average person up there is going to think this is what, you know, this is what the police report says. It's you know, it's a homicide suicide, and then we know it's not. And, you know, I bet the farm on it, just from my experience. So you know, and that's why when I joined you guys' Facebook group, you know, I vilify this guy, and you know, listen, you know, everybody, I didn't know the man, but what I can see, you know, it was a hit. Is, you know, it's just to clear his name, you know, and that's why that would be that's my goal, I guess, in a short way, is, you know, this man didn't do this, you know, and everybody up there, you know, anytime it's brought up, and I spoke to a couple of people after that happened, and they go along with what Calaveras County says on that, and you know, you can't argue with them. It's almost like 911. It's like 911. You know, as people believe it didn't happen that way, and some do. And same with this man. This man didn't do what everybody up there thinks he did. And you know, there's some people who know some things that may not want to speak out. Calaveras County is, you know, it's a screwy area, and I don't think it has the, you know, the corruption's more in, as far as the politics up there. You know, from boards of supervisors that I've seen come in and out, the people that I knew, what they did, you know, watching the drug trade up there and things like that. You know, the deputy on the street up there probably has no idea what's going on with the department. You know, I know Chris Hewitt a little bit. I didn't know Gary Coons, the former sheriff up there. But you know, there's some good guys up there. Some of these kids played football and baseball for me. I used to coach varsity at Bret Harte High School as assistant coach. So some of my kids I'm proud of are one's a lieutenant now, Anthony Eberhardt, great guy. But you know, I wouldn't dare go to them because they're going to back their department and such. But I think the main thing is to try to clear Philip's name.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think 1 week after these murders happened, I was up there trying to talk with some people, and everybody knew about it. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody was shocked. Even there was a newspaper person, I think it was the Press Democrat, and you could tell she was like, oh, great. You know, she kind of knew what we were going to ask her, but even, you know, they all had questions. There was a local bookstore, and she was like, there's no way that this guy did this. Well, we come back 2 weeks later, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody, you know, it's like, did they get the word to just shut up?
Sure.
They bought it. They bought it at that point. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like Stepford Wives up there, man. It really is. I'm telling you. I mean, you know what? That's why when I got divorced, I was living in Murphy's at the time. I got divorced. I was out of there in a few months. I moved to Tahoe. I didn't. It's, you know, number one. I mean, not that I was young. I moved up there in '89 after I left the police department, and I had a Gold's Gym in Foster City. I left and I sold everything, went up there, and it was great back then. But you know, I was just a regular guy up there. I wasn't doing much. I didn't get in the bail bond business until I sold out the country club, and that was probably 1993. And still didn't see a whole lot of stuff going on. It wasn't until I got involved with bounty hunting, and then Mariposa popped in, and it came in the picture. Then I ended up getting the Yosemite case, which just happened. I just happened to have a guy I believe was involved, and he is, you know. And you know, from then on, I didn't trust law enforcement up there. You know, I mean, when I see, let me digress. When I go to the house, Clifford Watkins was gone and such. You know, he was a really, really bad guy. I checked with state parole. This guy's a shooter. Matter of fact, the first thing he said when Ron and I were interviewing him in Shasta County was, he told me that first night he was behind the door with a .40 caliber. He said, I would have been able to kill you and nothing would have happened to me, you know. And then when I started looking for him, some of my witnesses were threatened, and actually one witness that lived in a house, he was being caretaken by an older man, really nice guy. Cliff Watkins went over and poured lighter fluid on the kid one day outside and lit him on fire. So, you know, and that was covered up, okay? And fast forward from there, one of my football players is getting married at Angels Camp, and his new mother-in-law is Cliff Watkins' former wife. She breaks down crying at the reception, telling me how Cliff was being notified every time I came to town. The sheriff's department would call him. You know, I mean, that's a really dangerous situation, and that's how the corruption was there. And even with Calaveras County, they protected Candler because in the book I write about my partner, after you do somebody, we caught Candler and everything, and Rick lived in Arnold, and Candler had lived there, with about 4 blocks away, believe it or not. Rick one evenings at the Shell station, and all of a sudden his window and his car gets punched out, his side window, he's hit in the face, he calls me. We go up there. We just had a feeling it had to be Candler. Rick couldn't really see him, but he just, this doesn't happen every day in a town of 2,200 people. And we went to the gas station after we went to patch him up a little bit, did a couple cuts. And the gal there knew who he was. Candler bought his cigarettes and beer there every day, lived 2 blocks away, walked up there. Calaveras came out on the assault on my partner, Rick James. Great guy, rest in peace. And she IDs all that. I know Paul. The sheriff's department writes it up as Paul Chandler, not Chandler. And then we talked to the gal later, just like you were speaking with the other people, and she changed her tune also. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this has to do with there's so many people in the drug business and up to even lower levels. They know we know you're slinging crank or dope or whatever it is, and they get leverage on people. And they get a little bit of leverage on you. And that leverage is usually because your hands are a little dirty, or somebody who's dirty, and they use that, and that's what's going on up there. That's why I was telling you about Murphy's. Possibly when I was living up there in Murphy's, I met with Couts Winery and Steve Couts and those guys. We were going to incorporate Murphy's away from county jurisdiction, go through the League of Cities in California, because we saw the corruption up there,
Yeah, you saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably getting worse. Okay, I want to kind of wrap this up here. There's a few other.
Real quickly.
Yeah, please go.
Real quickly, let's touch upon the little bit of power brokers up there with the CIA.
Yes.
Okay. The Freemasons, they're pretty much everywhere and such, and I spoke to you about the country club. My partner, John Eklund, great guy. He was a GS-16 with the CIA. He was in the Phoenix Project. He was actually being groomed for Bill Casey's job as a director at one time. And we spoke about Philip Marshall being up there with his ties to the company and Barry Seal. And there's, a lot of law enforcement guys living up there. And we talked about possibly that area is a cell for government operations or things like that. Just like Mina. Mina's not even on the map, and we spoke about that. So that's something that maybe we can talk about later on. I'll do a little bit more research with Greg on that. But there's my partner came from, Virginia, and he also built all the windmills. John Eklund built the windmills on 580 and such. But it's kind of ironic that we get these people that are high government positions that end up in the small towns.
Yeah, what a coincidence, nothing.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's thanks.
Pretty much is what they do. We see it all the time, right? I mean,
sure.
Yeah, I was a little shocked. I guess I shouldn't have been. Almost every town, every small town, there is a Mason, either a Mason temple, there's a Mason building, a Freemason. They're literally everywhere. They're in Dunsmuir, California, and Dunsmuir, California is a tiny little place. And I'm like, what are they doing here? And I asked some of my family, like, they're just a group. They do a charity. They give to the local charities, this and that. It's like people really have no idea how powerful and how influential these guys can be. My view on the Freemasons, especially in that area, there's no way that they do not know what happened with Philip Marshall. I'm not going to say that they were involved in it or anything, but there's no way that something like that happens in their town and they don't find out what the real deal is.
Exactly. When I became partners in 1989 with John Eklund and one other fella, like I said, once you're in the CIA or we call it the company, you're never out. And if you're going to be a partner in business, and here's the thing is that when you get out of the CIA, they sometimes give you a choice of I'll call them cell stations, but you can live your life and everything, but they'll set you up into another business because you really can't go out there and you just don't start. You've been in the CIA for so many years, and they're all sharp guys, but they'll set you up with something that kind of fits in the norm. And then when the three of us bought the country club up there, was nothing unusual I thought about it, except. Like I did speak about the Swedish guy that came out every 6 months or so, and we sat down and had a few drinks, and he was married to an Israeli colonel. You know, it kind of opens your eyes up to what's going on up there. Why would John be visited by this guy? So, you know, that on the surface of it, it doesn't look too bad, but as we look into a little bit more, but in Philip Marshall, I'll just like to say, you know, God rest his soul with his family and stuff like that. But you know, this group of ours on Facebook, you know, if we can, you know, get him clean on this thing, that would be our goals. That, you know, just to show people that he isn't the guy who did this.
Definitely, and that's why it's so great when you offered to help, you know, to do whatever you possibly could, because, you know, we definitely need that. And I think, you know, I know that there's a lot of us that are not going to stop asking questions, and that are not going to, you know, just let this thing die. And you know, whether it's because Philip Marshall, because people liked his views on September 11th, whether it's because there's children involved, you know, there's all these different reasons why we should figure out what happens. This could happen to anybody. This could happen to a lot of people. There could be people out there right now that are thinking about writing a similar book on Nina, on, you know, all of these different places, things like this. They take that as a warning shot that, well, you know what, maybe I'm not going to write this book, maybe I'm not going to tell this story. And even though the whole Contra thing happened a long time ago, it's like, you know, there's probably still people out there who you know, still have that itch. It's like, okay, well, maybe I can, maybe so much time has passed that maybe I won't be this big threat. But you know, I just say, you know, it's so humbling, and it's so nice to meet people that aren't scared. So I'm really glad that you're part of this group, because we definitely need you.
Thank you for having me in this group.
Absolutely, and just looking over some of the stuff that you've done, and some of the stuff that you've been involved in, and to say that you're still here, you know, I think it's a true blessing. It's been really a blessing to just chat with you. And, you know, sometimes you chat with people and it's just like you're chatting like you knew this guy your whole life. And that's kind of the feeling that I got when we started chatting.
So. Same here, Greg. I thank you very much.
Absolutely. I do got a few more things here I just wanted to kind of run by you here. Philip Marshall was last seen on January 31st, 2013. We know that the murders happened a couple days after. And likewise, the last documented communication from Alex Marshall was also on January 13th. Alex sent a message at 10:40 p.m. His sister made her last documented communication via cell phone at 10:10 that same night. So there's no more communication after January 31st, 2013, before midnight. And then his daughter, she used her cell phone to take a self-portrait at 10:55. After that, there's nothing. So we're talking about, what, 4 days of just missing time, or however you want to call it. You know, we don't know. So I know some of us were thinking a hostage situation, possibly. Maybe they were trying to get something from Marshall, and maybe he gave it to them, maybe he didn't. We had a tip about a dead man switch that kind of, to me, felt like a trap, because they wanted us to go back to the actual property and said that there was stuff there on the property. And, you know, I was a little reluctant because we had already been there, and I kind of felt like we were being set up to go back there, and then they'd get a trespassing thing or something like that. But whatever it is, you know, there are a lot of people who privately, you know, will help us out, will try to help us out. And we just, you know, it's so nice to have people like you, with Greg Ford, have all of these great people who are not scared to actually come forward and, you know, offer some help and offer some tips. And I'm definitely going to be, you know, I'm going to go through all this documentation, all the stuff that I do have, and I'd love to privately probably run some ideas past you and just kind of run some of these tips by you and see what you think about that.
Sure, no, I'd love to. Yeah, just get a hold of me anytime. We'll talk about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Because again, it goes back to Marshall, and they were saying he was dependent on drugs. He had depression. He was quote unquote grounded as a pilot in September of 2006. He was diagnosed with being bipolar. All of these things, I think, subconsciously to the average person who's just reading this is like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. Yeah, he was bipolar. He was depressed. He had, these mental problems. He was broke. I mean, they actually tried to say that, that Philip Marshall was broke. I'm like, have you guys seen his house? That's like, and he's got the other, the other Santa Barbara house. I don't think he was broke at all. I don't really buy that. Let's see some of the other things. Yeah, he was under care of some doctor. I did want to know more about that doctor. I would like to know more about the pain meds, but the toxicology, there really wasn't too much there, so I'll be curious. I'm going to send those to you too, and maybe you can kind of
oh, great.
Sure. Notice anything strange about that. Philip Marshall's first wife, I found it really curious that she was like, she basically said that Philip Marshall was not that involved with Barry Seal. We know that Philip Marshall, claimed to be Barry Seal's taxi driver. She said that was not true. But at the same time, Philip Marshall's first wife also said that there would be times where Philip Marshall would be gone, and she wouldn't know what he was doing, which is something we see with these quote-unquote taxi drivers or people that are involved in this stuff. They just disappear for a couple weeks.
Absolutely.
There's the theory that the kids were not supposed to actually be there, that they were supposed to, and I think that came from Wayne Madsen too. Philip Marshall's second wife, Sean, she went to Turkey, I believe, during this time, so she was out of the country, if I'm not mistaken. But there was
yeah, excuse me. I was going to say that's to deny any plausibility with her involvement, and that there's something with that dating, Sheriff Coons up there. We can get into that later, but get her out of the country at that time, that totally negates her as a kind of suspect, or it puts it on her if we get in trouble. She hired a hitman to do this, or hit team, or hated her husband or something, and the kids were witnesses. We'll take them out, and what it does is shows, oh, look, she left the country. That means that she it'd be reversed the other way around. So there's a lot. I think there's a question there myself. But go ahead.
Definitely, yeah. And there was somebody killed in Turkey who actually looked like her. So I think Wayne Madsen was thinking that maybe it was actually supposed to be Sean that was killed in Turkey.
Really? I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, that to me was, it was like, wow, okay, that's pretty shocking. And then I was like, well, Turkey, what the heck is she doing in Turkey? But she was getting like spices, so she was going over there and bringing things back so that she could sell back in Murphy's and back in other small places. I didn't realize Phil actually set her up with that business. So there was a contact. There's a Turkey contact, and Turkey is also another intelligence place too, right? I mean,
sure.
So it's just all of this stuff is like, what is going on? They're moving these people around, but there is one theory is that the kids were not supposed to be with Philip Marshall during that time, and they just happened to be there because that dog was actually Sean's dog, or was staying at Sean's house. That dog was not did not live with Phil Marshall either.
Oh,
so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's there's a few interesting things about that. The other thing, I guess the last thing about Sean Marshall, because I did try to reach out to her on Facebook, and she just was not having it. Which I get, whatever, it's some random guy. Who the heck is this guy trying to reach out to me? But, I guess after this happened, she had all of the kids over, and so I thought that was kind of weird too. It's like, okay, is she doing that to protect herself, to make sure nothing happens to her? But I guess there was some weird, some of the kids that were there, so okay, so the, you know, the 3 murders happen, maybe a day or 2 later when Sean gets back. She has all of the kids' friends. They all sleep over there, which is kind of weird. And I guess there was some questions about the behavior. There might have been some, I don't want to get too deep into that, but there might have been, basically, she was not acting sane, I guess, and maybe that's just because of everything that happened. She had just lost her two kids, so I can totally get that. But you know, I just kind of felt like, was she trying to protect herself, having all these kids over, all these people, so that, you know, to make sure that whoever came after Phil Marshall and her kids didn't try to come after her too. And then when I found out that she had gotten with Gary Kuntz, the sheriff,
right,
at the time, I was wondering, okay, well, when did that start? And then Gary Kuntz, since I think you said he passed away. I know he passed away, but it was like a couple years ago, maybe, right?
Sure, yeah, it was apparently a heart attack.
Yeah, okay,
heart attack.
Which I thought that was kind of weird too. But when it came out that you know, Sean and Gary Kuntz there was something between them, I was like, this is getting really, really weird. Then they
right.
all of the kids have this cat run. They have a marathon, and I'm like, what are they doing this for? And then everything is to make Phil look bad. You know, everything is Phil Marshall is this bad guy. Sean is this great mom. They have the Forest Meadows golf course. When we were there, they had just done a charity. They raised like $10,000 or something. Like, what are they raising this money for? What the hell is this for? Like, everything is just. It was just really, really odd. It just. Maybe the Stepford Wives might be the best way to really put it, because it just didn't make sense. We tried talking with the guy who, I guess, who was running the golf course. You know, who, I don't know if he was the owner there or what. And very, very nice guy, but you know, we tried to talk to him about Philip Marshall, and he didn't really want to talk. He had a Bret Hart football helmet there, so obviously he had a son or somebody that was also going to Bret Hart at that same time too. But
so that's the Dillashaw family, and as a matter of fact, his nephew TJ is the UFC world champion. So the Dillashaw family, good people. Yeah. Look at TJ Dillashaw is his nephew. Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, sure.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah. No, there's too much that happened after this happened and occurred. And it's interesting about the timeline. You go back to, just real quickly, digress, go back to the timeline of the last text from the girl and the photos and such, and those are 3 days. That makes sense, even if add another day or so, that him wearing the same clothes, you know, I mean, maybe they took care of him first and they had the kids alive for a short time. I don't know, you know, but that part. And the other thing too is, you know, and I didn't put this public till about a year and a half ago when stuff was going on with myself, is that I was opened up by the FBI out of San Antonio, Texas, and they used me online to track down child predators, child porn, and white supremacists. And I was also with California DOJ at the time as an operative. And a very short time, probably less than a year, but my ex-wife, who's a school teacher at Michelson and Murphy's, she never knew about it. I never told her about it. You know, there's no reason to tell her about it. So, Philip's first wife not knowing or never, you know, when you're involved with an organization like that, you don't want to talk about it. They tell you not to. So if he did fly with Barry Seal, touch it, you know, now him coming out with it, it might have been, you know, part of that, him coming out telling people that is to say, hey, look, this might happen to me. It was like a warning publicly, because not everybody's going to read his book. Just like I did with Eyes on Me. First time I said, hey, I had an NSA connection, a CIA connection. My partner's in the CIA. That's a fact. You can look at Sequoia Woods. And my other things that I tell people is because, hey, you know, I'm not just making this stuff up. There might be a reason that I disappear one day, you know, and that may have been a reason he came out later with that.
Interesting. That would make sense. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, because, you know, a lot of the guys, like, you know, a lot of those guys, you know, especially operatives, people on payroll. They're the ones who, you know, if you're married, your wife's going to know you're with the company, you know. But if you're an operative or you're a money guy or a taxi driver, as you say, then they're not going to know about it. You know, they just won't. And plus, it endangers your family. As soon as you get it out there, it's going to endanger your family. You know. But Philip, like I said, Philip probably was in grave danger the minute he wrote the first book. You know.
That's a great point.
That's what I'm thinking. You know.
All right, my friend. Any final words here before we shut this segment down?
No, I thank you, Greg, and all your listeners. And if they want to read Ultimate Prey, it's on Amazon, and it's on ebook and paperback. And if you do buy, I'd love to hear any kind of reviews and such. But I thank you for your time and the interview, and we'll talk later on.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to purchase this book. I'm really fascinated by this now. I want to learn more. I think I'm about 30 pages into the PDF, but I do like having a physical book, so I will definitely be buying this book. All right,
great,
my friend. Thank you so much. And
all right, buddy. Thank you.
I will be in touch, and I have a lot more questions for you.
Well, maybe we'll take a ride up to Murphy's together in the near future.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Hope you have a good day.
All right, my man. Take care.
I'll stay in contact.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good one.